Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Jack Conti of Patreon coming to us from Berkeley. How's your day going?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah. Jack was just saying he's going to do some virtual ping pong, VR ping pong after this, which is kind of a cool sci-fi thing. I'm going to go be doing real pickleball, physical pickleball, which is kind of related to ping pong in some ways. They kind of share some attributes. Can you put spin on the ball and like body English when you're playing virtual VR ping pong?
Man, I almost can't believe how good it is. And there's also a little bit of like haptic feedback. So when you hit the ball, your paddle buzzes. It feels like you're actually hitting a ball. And then you hear the sound of the ball in your earphones. The first time I did it, it was totally mind-blowing. I couldn't believe how much it felt like ping pong.
That's bizarre and cool in many ways. I was looking at one of our customers on Foundersuite, and they're doing like this body pack that I think has like a subwoofer in the back, but it's like this haptic suit that you can like simulate I guess a real life rock concert or something by wearing this suit, to feel the bass. And it's crazy world. Did you read Ready Player One or watch that movie?
I did. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's like strange how much that's coming true in a weird kind of terrifying way.
Totally. Awesome. Let's jump right into it. What is Patreon?
So Patreon is
what is Patreon?
Oh, no worries. It's a membership platform that makes it really easy for creators to get paid. We help creators, accept subscription payments from their fans, and we help fans, connect to their favorite creators they love and their other fellow super fans. And it's an amazing thing that's helping creators like turn their dreams into realities and build real businesses and get a new revenue stream. So it's been a wonderful thing for creative people.
So for anyone who isn't familiar, I think you're pretty well known, but for how does it work? Maybe take it into a little bit more granular detail. An artist, a musician goes on here, brings their fans on, imports their fans. How does it actually work? Yeah.
So a creator will set up a Patreon page, and it's like a profile page like you would set up anywhere else on the web. Mm-hmm. And then that creator goes on to SoundCloud, they go on to YouTube, they go on to Facebook, they go wherever their audience is, and they say, hey, everybody, I just set up a Patreon page. Come become a patron over here on my Patreon page. And they send a bunch of folks to their Patreon page, and then a portion of those folks, convert and become patrons. And when they do that, they opt into, however many, one of however many tiers the creator has set up. So the creator can set up a $5 tier, a $10 tier, and a $50 tier, or they can set up a $1, a $3, and a $6 tier. And then their patrons, choose the tier that they want to, that they want to opt into. And then, depending on which tier they opt into, they get extra live streams or behind the scenes content or, gated community or merchandise or whatever it is. And then the patron pays that subscription payment, and the creator, makes good on the the extra stuff that they're offering their super fans.
That's cool. And for the fan, is there a commitment in terms of how long you are pledging to be a Patreon?
It's a subscription payment that you can cancel at any time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So musicians obviously this makes sense. What are the most popular categories? Or if you do the pie chart of like types of creators on this, how's it sort of break out?
It's a lot of video, podcasts, and visual artists, so web comics and drawing, illustration, that sort of thing. But it's everything. There's there's communities, there's ASMR, there's cosplay, there's live stuff, there's programmers, there's cryptocurrency education, there's you name it, it exists on Patreon. It's kind of like it's a little bit like YouTube. It's just sort of everything.
Interesting. Is it, I'm sure the answer is both, but is it more for niche and long tail creators, or are you seeing, major artists come on and use this as a way to build a new revenue stream?
So it's an open platform for anybody. But we do see there are now creators who are, and I think, I wish more folks had asked me this question, because we are seeing creators now making millions of dollars on Patreon. So there are creators that are literally making millions of dollars a year. They're leasing office space, they're hiring teammates, they're building media companies, they're doing the whole thing, and financing it using our membership product. So it is being used by folks to basically build, a subscription revenue stream that's more robust and safe than, fluctuating ad revenue. Yes, it's being used by folks, at the top, the sort of biggest YouTubers in the world, and some of the biggest creators in the world, but it's also available and open to everybody.
Interesting. What are your top 2 or 3 most unusual, or like you mentioned, ASMR? We've never guessed that's on there. Or what are your top most interesting creative out there types of creators that you've seen? You probably have a
gosh,
yeah.
I mean, there's some of my favorite creators are just things that I wouldn't necessarily have expected, and just things that I think are amazing, or creators who are doing particularly creative, weird things. There's this one creator named Jacob Collier. I mean, he's actually a Grammy award-winning musician. He's done a lot of, he has records out, and he's signed to Quincy Jones's management. But the music that he sings, often he doesn't use like Western scales, so he'll just sing mathematical intervals and stack them that only work in a particular key, and it just sounds just fresh and different and bizarre and beautiful, and amazing. So yeah, there's creators like him. There's folks that do like 3D printing, so you can 3D print models for RPG games, and there's like Sims mods, and there's anime, and there's like ukulele creators. There's a whole like group of sailing vloggers. It's pretty cool.
Oh, sailing. Yes, I'm really into sailing. I've seen, okay, now you're like touching my space. Like, yeah, I've seen some of these sailing vloggers that are out there, and I love this idea. My wife and I, about 10 years ago, went off and sailed halfway around the world. This is before you guys were around, I'm pretty sure. This is 2008, 2009. And now I'm seeing these sailors who are making a probably pretty good living. Do you have any idea like how much these guys are actually making? I'd be curious.
Not off the top of my head, but yeah. I know that it's a real business now. Like you can do it. You can reach millions of people, and you can make enough of a living to like build a team around you, and hire editors, and I mean the web is changing so fast, and creativity is changing so fast. I think a lot of people don't realize that it is now possible. It's not a dream anymore. It's now possible to be a professional creator. And all the infrastructure exists, just like a lot of infrastructure exists for startups, to kind of scale and build a website and accept payments and do everything you need to do. The same is true for creators. There's a lot of infrastructure out there for artists and creators to build a business out of their work. And it's just incredible watching this happen. I mean, it's unfolding, right in front of us.
It's very cool. So where'd the idea come from? What's the backstory? What were you doing before, and how'd you come up with this idea?
So I'm a creator myself. I've been a YouTuber for the last decade and a half, and I've got a couple bands, one called Scary Pockets, one called Pomplamoose. Pomplamoose just passed 1 million subscribers on YouTube, which I'm super psyched about. We still come out with a video every week, so does Scary Pockets. I have a solo channel as well, and about 7 years ago, my wife signed a record deal with Warner and went off to go tour the world by herself for her solo career. Cool. And she kind of left me home alone to go crazy by myself, and I started working on this music video. Ended up costing me over $10,000. I drained my savings account. I maxed out 2 credit cards. I built a replica of Millennium Falcon cockpit behind me. I worked with these 2 like robot manufacturers. This one guy from the University of Tucson who built a 3D printed hexapod robot. The other guy from the UK, a roboticist hobbyist who built this animatronic head and programmed it to sing the lyrics to the song that I made. Cool. Anyway, I built all this shit. It took me like 3 months, drained my savings account, just like totally went crazy on it. And at the end of this process, I realized, fuck, I don't know. Sorry. Can I swear? Is that all
Yeah,
right?
it's fine. Go for it.
I realized,
Drop the F-bomb.
I was like, I'm going to post this video on YouTube. It's going to get 1 million views because that's what my videos would get when I upload them. I'll get 1 million views and I'll get paid $160 in ad revenue. And like the thought of working for 3 months and then giving this thing that I made from nothing, like to YouTube to like monetize it, I just thought like, there's got to be a better way here. My fans are going to go nuts when they see this video. I knew they were going to lose their minds because I've got this awesome community of fans on YouTube, and I made it behind the scenes videos so they could see all the work that I put into it. I knew people would really appreciate it. And the thought of getting paid $150 for 3 months, I was like, there's got to be a better way for creators to get paid. And it became very clear to me that there's this gap between what creators are worth in the world and their paychecks at the end of the month. There's this huge gap there. And it's bizarre to me that like we were all, as humans, we're all just okay with this. We're like, yeah, you just put a video online and then it reaches 1 million people. It reaches 10 football stadiums full of other humans. And then you get paid a couple $100 for that. That's how it works. Like I couldn't believe that this is how this is like the system that we've all opted into and agreed to. It's bogus to me. So yeah, the idea was like, okay, what if I just ask my fans to become a member of me, like KQED or like WNYC or SF Diploma or any membership system. But let's just take that membership tech. Let's put a bow on it. Let's build a CMS. Let's build a CRM. Let's democratize it and make it available to any creator in the world. Yeah. That was the idea. And so I sketched it out on 14 pieces of printer paper. I called up my freshman year roommate. He got super excited about it. He was an engineer and an entrepreneur, and he got so pumped. He started coding it that night. He started building Patreon, and within about 2 weeks of launching, I was the first creator on Patreon. Within about 2 weeks of launching, I was making 6 figures as an artist. Wow! Like that. I mean, just instantly. And so you can imagine what happened next. All these creators saw this random kind of middle of the pack YouTuber making a killing, and folks just started flocking to Patreon. Here we are 7 years later now. We're sending over $1 billion a year to creators, and there's 200,000 creators, making money every month on the platform, and over 6 million patrons. And it's really become like a really important, cool piece of creative infrastructure that's helping creators make revenue and build businesses.
What was that number again? You're doing $1 billion payouts a month to the creators?
$1 billion a year paid out to creators. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. Did you in the beginning, did you target just musicians and then expand into other creators, or did you open it up? Was it an open platform from the start?
It was open from the beginning, and that was against the advice of a lot of people that I knew in just friends and people who had built companies and other people that I talked to and were advising me. People were saying like, hey, go pick one vertical. Pick just video, or pick just podcasters, or pick just musicians. Pick one vertical. And, I didn't do that. And the reason I didn't do that is because it's a few things. One, I felt like it's not about the vertical. You want to focus at the early stage of a company, you want to focus on a very specific use case and very specific user. And for me, we were focusing on a very specific use case and a very specific creator. And it turns out that the categorizing element had nothing to do with what type of media you uploaded. It wasn't like video or music or anything like that. The categorizing element was, I'm a creator who posts online and manages an online community, and I'm getting massive impact and reach online, but I'm not making very much money from it. That was our target user. And it didn't matter if you were uploading podcasts or if you were uploading videos, you still needed this membership infrastructure to kind of power your business. And that had nothing to do with what type of media you uploaded. So we ended up going against that advice and making it available to any type of creator.
Interesting. I was kind of thinking about your business a little bit. I mean, and this is probably only partially accurate, but it's sort of, your business model was enabled in some ways, like when Napster happened, right? Because didn't that take all the economics, at least for music, right? It took all the economics out of the music business, right? People aren't selling CDs. They have to make money other ways if they want to be a musician. you know, concert sales is one way, merch sales, but like you sort of like left this void there, like you were saying a few minutes ago. So this gap between what they're worth and what they're getting paid, right? I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a question in there or just a sort of observation, but yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, and even more broadly, you know, there's been a few kind of cataclysmic events in the last 100 years that I think have led to very, you know, different business models for creators. You know, it's only about 120 years ago or so that humans figured out how to record light onto a piece of photographic paper, or how to record sound onto a wax cylinder. And at that moment began the you know, the sort of rise of unit sales as the primary economic driver for arts creation, right? It's like, oh, I'll put my art on a wax cylinder and I'll sell that wax cylinder. I'll put my film, I'll put my you know, my story on a piece of photographic paper, and I'll sell that story. I'll sell the paper, right? I'll sell the celluloid film, and then you get the movie industry, you get television, you get the record industry, and then those industries boomed over the next 100 years, right? Over the 20th century, you know, record companies, you know, you have truckers and manufacturers and retail and Tower Records, and like billions of dollars of infrastructure got set up to basically distribute physical goods around the world with art on them. And then the internet happened in the early 2000s, and suddenly art was infinitely replicable and no longer scarce. And you have things like Napster and SoundCloud and YouTube and Facebook, and now you upload your art and it goes from the creator of the art to the consumer of the art like that. Yeah. And you don't need infrastructure. You don't need record companies. You don't need jewel case manufacturers. You don't need trucking companies. So that is kind of the big moment for artists where distribution got separated from monetization. Right, because monetization was built into that 100 years of infrastructure. It wasn't very good for artists, but it was at least built in. But then after that, when the web happened, the web solved distribution first and forgot about monetization. So YouTube was built without monetization tools for creators. YouTube was built without monetization tools for creators. SoundCloud was built without monetization tools for creators. The web figured out distribution first and separated it from monetization. That is the problem that Patreon is solving. Fortunately, it's coming back together for creators. So monetization tools are now filling the web for creative people. And over the next decade or two, we're going to start to see those business models emerge, and we're going to start to see the rise of this creative class in a very fast and dynamic way. I personally think it's going to be a second renaissance for the arts. Creators are going to be empowered and courted in a way that they just haven't been for literally hundreds of years.
Very interesting. Okay, we could go so deep into all this, but I'll try and keep it because I want to get to the fundraising part. Is there a distribution, kind of riffing on what you just said there, is there a distribution piece within Patreon as well, or is it really just the monetization piece that you're solving?
So we started very focused with monetization. You know, creators want three things. They want to make art, they want to get paid, and they want to reach people with their art. And we started with the get paid problem. Sure. And why did we start there? Well, because YouTube already solved the reach people problem. Facebook already solved the reach people problem. We don't want to go to bat against 6,000 machine learning engineers at Facebook who are solving content personalization and recommendation algorithms. Like we're not going to win that war. So the war that we're going to win, and where we can be the best in the world, and where I think Patreon's product is the best in the world, is at helping creators. We help creators make more money than they make anywhere else on the web. And we're the best at that. That's why creators use Patreon. So we started there. Now we have built, along the way, we built a CMS. And of course, we're thinking about ways to leverage that and to help creators distribute their work and reach, their patrons, and also reach, top of the funnel folks who are not yet their patrons. And of course, we're starting to think about that kind of stuff. I'd say right now, Patreon is not a distribution platform. It's not like a YouTube. It's not like a SoundCloud. It's not a place to get discovered, but we want to change that. We would like discovery to be better and easier on Patreon. We're starting with search and helping connect patrons and creators.
I don't know my facts very well, but I'm hearing was it Billie Eilish or a couple, big musicians are doing kind of private concerts for certain groups of fans that pay $30 or something like that. Is that happening on Patreon, or is that happening sort of on their own platform of some sort?
It's a strange hacked combination right now. So we find a lot of creators doing those streams, but making them private and making them patron only. But they're not doing the streams on Patreon. They're doing the streams on other platforms.
I see.
And then they're saying, hey, if you want the extra stream, or if you want to stay for the extra 30 minutes, or if you want the, if you want the behind the scenes glimpse, then you can become a patron.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Okay, really just such a cool. Last question. Do you guys have competition? I mean, is your competition like a GoFundMe page, or just the traditional business model, or are there some that are doing this?
Yeah, there's a lot of competition at this point. There wasn't 7 years ago. Now there is. We kind of categorized it in 3 buckets. There's the kind of vertical specific competitors. That's Patreon for podcasts, Patreon for video, Patreon for X. Now it's kind of it's become a thing.
You become a verb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
So that's one kind of category, and there's a whole bunch of those folks. None of them are really exactly like one-to-one competitors, but they're trying to get creators paid. So in essence, it's competition. Then there's a second category, which is just international copycats. That's the Patreon of France, the Patreon of Germany, the Patreon of Brazil, the Patreon of Japan, etc. And then the third category is essentially distribution platforms building competitive feature sets that help get creators paid. Now, it's funny, sometimes people ask me about those and ask me if, how I feel about them. Like, I'm psyched. I couldn't be more pumped that YouTube is finally building some monetization tools into the site. Like, it still makes me sick that like creators can get millions of views and make a few $100. Like, that is a broken system, and YouTube needs to fix it, and they are now. So that's great. And Facebook's working on that too, and Twitch has got some great things going. And that's kind of a third category of competitor, is these distribution platforms building vertical specific feature sets into their platforms. Oh, sorry, building monetization feature sets into them.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about fundraising. You guys have raised, I usually ask how much have you guys raised, how many rounds? I know you've done multiple rounds. I think the last was Series E, but what's your funding summary?
Yeah, so we just finished our Series E, and we started in 2013. We raised a $2.1 million seed round, and then our A was 15, and our B was 30, and our C was 30, and our D was 50 or 60, and our E was 90. So whatever that is, I'll let you do the math. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's incredible. And it looks, I'm just looking at the pitch book, it looks like those were fairly spread out, every, 18 months or plus or minus, something like that, right? Over the time frame. Let's go in order here. Talk about raising that seed round. Way back when I worked with Kickstarter, when they were just getting off the ground. I was doing some consulting at the time and tried to help them raise that early on, and people thought it was a crazy idea. Did you encounter the same kind of sentiment when you were raising that seed round, or did you already have, you talked about your example of how you got 6 figures pretty quickly on your own platform. Did you guys have like traction from the get-go? Talk about raising the seed round. It was really the question.
Yes, we had traction on the platform, on the product, but I was a first-time founder. I was a first-time CEO. I was a creator. I was like, so I had zero credibility as a company builder, as an entrepreneur. Zero. And on top of that, investors didn't know, they didn't understand our market. Now investors get this, it's like people call it the passion economy or the creative economy. And like people understand that there's this economy here. They understand what creators are. I spent the first 30 to 40 minutes of every fundraise pitch just explaining what creators were to investors. I didn't even have time to pitch the company. We were just answering questions like, wait a minute, come on, how many YouTubers are there? Is this really that big of a market? Come on, could you ever get to $1 billion that you're sending to creative? No way. And I had to just convince people that like creators were a real thing and that there were more and more of them and that this was a real problem for them. That was most of the pitch, honestly, at the beginning, was just trying to get people to understand the market that we were serving.
That's interesting. But you ended up with some pretty impressive names. I think Alexis Ohanian, and I saw some other names in there I recognize. You know, how did you end up identifying? You were a creator yourself. You doesn't sound like you were in the tech or CEO world. How'd you kind of get connected to some of these people?
So my freshman year roommate, Sam Yam, who is co-founder, we're co-founders in Patreon together, and he had built companies before.
Okay.
And so he knew a bunch of folks who we added as advisors who could facilitate some introductions. That was really big. So we added a couple early advisors who knew some VCs and knew some seed folks and could kind of send some intros and get us some meetings. And so that was kind of how we got the meetings. But most of the people we met said no. I mean, we pitched a lot of people and almost everybody said no. It was
how many do you think you pitched? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think you pitched at that seed round stage?
You know, I don't remember. It was probably like 20 to 30 folks.
Oh, okay. That's actually not that many. I mean, that's but still.
Yeah. It wasn't like hundreds, you know. We pitched maybe 20 to 30 folks, and it took probably a few months. And then a couple months in, Josh Felser from Freestyle Capital. He's not at Freestyle anymore, but at the time he was. He wrote us our first check. We were looking for $700,000, and he said, "I'll take the full 700." And we had been talking to a few other firms at the time, and so we called them up and we said, "Hey, sorry, the round is full. We got this new investor that wants to take the full thing." And they said, wait a minute, come on, you should raise more than that.
Yeah,
you should raise $2 million, and let us put some in too. And actually, of course, that was a little self-serving, but they were also right. And I'm glad we raised $2 million instead of $700,000. So, the other investor that we added very early on that was like company inflecting and very important for us was Sar Gur from Sar, who was in our seed round. And Sar has just become like a very close mentor and coach to me, and has been so active and involved and so wonderful. And he's like a very good. Sar is an operator and a founder himself, and so also just like a very good manager, and just helped me a lot. And still helps me a lot. So that was awesome getting him on board, and I'm glad we ended up raising a little bit more than we needed, because we were able to take a few extra swings, hire a few more people, make a few more mistakes, try a few more things. So that was really valuable.
Cool. I don't want to go into each round, but any notable anecdotes or stories from maybe the A, B, or C, or even D rounds, and those in between rounds. I want to touch on the most recent round, but any did it just kind of go as planned? You're growing, you're hitting your metrics.
No, nothing goes as planned.
Yeah.
It never went as planned. It was always a struggle and always hard. I'll share one like really tough lesson that I learned early on. Actually, this wasn't a particularly tough lesson. Just like everybody was saying no. We were just getting no over and over and over again.
Yep.
Nobody understood creators. And so we just kept a list of the common objections, and I would call investors afterwards, and I would not beg, but I would say like, hey, I really want feedback. Like I don't worry about sparing my feelings. Just like, I believe in this thing, and I really want to know like, what's the disconnect? How come you're not willing, and it's not because I want your money. I just want to make the pitch better, help me make the pitch better. And so, we would sort of triangulate between their answers there and then the kind of questions they asked and where they seemed to wrap their heads around, what the blockers were. And it became clear that like there were a few concerns. One was like, what is this creator market and how big really is it? So I made a second deck that just described the creator market. And I would start the pitches with that deck to help to like set context. So we would identify the blockers with investors, and then we would build stories and quantitative models and qualitative models to describe those or to get over those blockers. That was a really important thing, is like being very clear about what the problems and blockers were and then solving them one by one. The second key learning was, I went into these first rounds of pitches. I'm sitting at these tables in Silicon Valley looking at investors. I'm a YouTuber. Like I'm like looking at these people going like, what the hell am I doing here? I have no idea how to talk to these folks. And I was intimidated, and so I was trying to talk about the business and trying to talk about metrics and trying to talk about our growth and like all these things. And the truth was that wasn't who I was. It wasn't that I couldn't grow into that and I couldn't learn that. Of course, I'm still CEO, so I've had to learn a lot about business and management and people and finances and HR and all the things that CEOs have to learn, the whole CEO skill set. Yeah. But I didn't have that skill set back then. And so I made this adjustment where I thought, you know what, I'm going to be myself. In these pitch meetings, I'm just going to be who I am. And I started the pitches differently moving forward. I started the pitches with the story that I just told you of this robot, music video and the sets and uploading this YouTube video and feeling like I wasn't making any money and feeling like it had to change. And I had pictures of the whole thing. So I had like, here's the Millennium Falcon replica that I built. Here's the robots. Like, here's the thing. I'd spend 10 minutes showing them like, I'm a crazy fucking artist and I went crazy on this music video and I got paid $150 for it. Do you see the problem? Like I would start, I would like really get passionate and like, and it turns out that was the thing that resonated with investors. And what I didn't realize, I thought I was taking a risk, but actually for those early rounds and for those early stage investors, what they care about more than the business or the model or the product, what they care about more is like, is this a passionate person who's solving a real problem that actually exists? And are they going to go to the ends of the earth and back in order to solve it and never quit? Because building a company from scratch is the hardest freaking thing in the world. It's so hard. And like, they know that. And they know that unless you deeply care about this problem, you're going to give up. And so they want to see somebody who's like committed, like for a decade.
Fanatical,
fanatical to solve a problem that they really deeply care about. And telling that story showed investors that like, we've fulfilled that criteria.
I love it. That's great. No, it's really good advice. So continuing on that, with these later rounds, the C, D, and even E, typically it becomes more about metrics and less about the vision and passion and everything else, but more about metrics. How has it evolved with these later pitches? Is your story still start with something like that anecdote, or are you now presenting your metrics and growth metrics, stuff like that?
Yeah. I would say it's not, the dichotomy is not so much early is about passion and late is about metrics. I wouldn't say it's quite like that. I would say early is about what you're going to do. And the later stage rounds are about what you've done.
Sure.
So the early stage rounds, you're right. It defaults to story. It defaults to vision. It defaults to passion and people. Who's the team? How excited are we? How big is this problem? What could we do? It's all about potential energy. Later stage rounds are about kinetic energy. It's about what, how is that potential energy translated? How is it manifesting in the business? Have you found your growth engines? How do you know? What are those engines? Can you describe them? Are they clear? What investors want to know in a C, D, and E is like, hey, are we looking at a just add water business? Can we just pour money into R&D and generate growth for the company? And if they feel confident in that, then you're likely to raise around. But it doesn't mean that passion and people and story don't matter. I mean, still with our Series E pitches, I was pitching crossover funds that that work with companies going public. These are late stage pre-IPO growth funds and growth equity funds. I started every single pitch meeting with the robot Millennium Falcon story.
You do, yeah.
Every single one of them. I still do it. And I'm talking to people who are investing in public companies, and I start with the robot story.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. That's really exciting. Let's see. Future plans for fundraising. I mean, how many more letters can you do before you have to go public? Are you starting to think, you don't have to tell me your going public plans, but how are you thinking about that, right? Because there's kind of expectations when you're talking to crossover investors that this is on an IPO track. So what's going through your head?
Yeah, what's going through my head is I believe that Patreon has the potential to be a long-term independent company that does our mission our way. That's what I want for Patreon. I don't want to be swallowed by another company who has their own set of KPIs and their own culture.
Yep.
And who would end up directing Patreon into a different path. I'm not saying that couldn't ever happen, because there are actually a number of great companies that I think are closer to Patreon than people realize. But I'm talking about the ad revenue companies, the companies who are governed by ad revenue, who I think would be what most people think of as likely acquirers for Patreon. I don't want that. I don't want that. I would. I don't think they would take care of our creators. I just don't think they would. So when we're thinking about Patreon's options and its path forward, the idea of being a public company that is independent and maintains our own culture and our own KPIs and our own direction and our own way of thinking about the world with our own governance principles, that is really exciting to me. I think that's a wonderful world for creators. It's a wonderful world for Patreon. It's a more competitive environment, which is net beneficial for creators and consumers. So I prefer that path. And I think that's a healthier path for the creative ecosystem.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is a little off topic, but what's your culture like? Is it full of creators in the company, and how have you cultivated that, if that's accurate, or what is the culture like? I'm curious.
I would say the most clear thing about our culture is what we call our first core behavior is put creators first. That is the number one thing that we do at the company. It's the first lesson we learn. It's the first piece of our culture that we teach new employees. We talk about it all the time. When we do stand-ups, we give examples of people who've put creators first and how and when and why. Putting creators first manifests in the code we push. It manifests in the customer service emails that we respond to. It manifests in the types of trust and safety policies that we create. It becomes something that's just influenced the entire company and the thousands of micro decisions that happen, on an hourly basis inside of an organization. So, that's a really important point of our culture. I think of it as the primary point of our operating system, if you will. The culture is kind of the operating system of a company, and for us, putting creators first is at the top of that. So that, everyone at Patreon bleeds for creators. When we had a creator come to the office before we were in the middle of a global pandemic, when we had a creator come to the office, and that creator would play a show or play a couple songs, the room, you could hear a pin drop, silence. Everybody is 100% focused. When the creator finishes, we stand up, we applaud, we cheer. We exist for those creators. We want them to feel special and recognized. We don't want them to feel like cogs in a machine and numbers and, like you feel on these distribution platforms. So that I think is the most important part of our culture. And then, there's a lot of other things that are important too, but I've been talking for 3 minutes. So
that's great. I won't keep you. I know you're a busy guy with a big company and important company runs. Last question is, anything we haven't covered, any other tips, tactics, advice you would give your younger self if you go back to 2013 or whatever it was, and we're starting this all over again?
Yes. Just keep going. That's it. All you have to do is not quit. That's it. That's all you have to do. It doesn't mean like be stupid or do the same thing every time if it's not working. It doesn't mean just keep pounding a wall relentlessly. But, you know, change, like try something else, try something orthogonal, try something slightly different, you know, pivot 15 degrees, you know, see where it gets you. But just don't quit. Like there were so many moments that were so hard and so honestly dark and painful. And like, you know,
what was the darkest or hardest moment? Like, is there any anecdote you can share? Because I think people really appreciate this, especially when they're struggling with their own startup.
Yeah. I don't, you know, they're too tough and too raw to like talk about publicly. I will say, so I won't give names, so I'll generalize.
Okay.
Like having to part ways with a friend.
Yeah.
There were many of those moments, right? Because in the early stage, you're bringing in everybody you can, bringing in people you know. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Sure.
And like when you have to make a change and part ways with somebody that you convinced to come join this mission and, you know, it worked so hard to pull out of their current job and promise the world. And like, and then you have to make a change. That is just so hard and a tough thing. And yeah, there's been a lot of those moments. That was a lot of moments. And I mean, that's, you know, that's some of the hardest stuff. Then there's another few moments that were pretty tough when like I think the hardest thing as a founder is making mistakes on the job because you're a first-time founder and like, but everybody thinks like, oh, you're a CEO. You like either you should know what to do or you should just get a professional CEO. And so part of the hard stuff is like making mistakes on the job and learning to not like beat yourself up over it because the press is calling you out, employees are calling you out, you know, it just your users are calling you out, and like somehow you got to get up in the morning and lead people and have the, I don't know if it's confidence or stupidity or what, but you got to just like get up and just keep going. And man, that is so hard. And I remember a few moments where I clearly made a mistake. I was like, okay, this was my bad. I admitted it to the company, like, hey, I fucked up. And I just didn't run a planning process really well, and it freaked people out, and they were upset and felt like I was, you know, pushing in too much and getting in their way and not creating an autonomous culture. And they were right. And like, I just wasn't that was my intention. I just didn't understand how to dream with a team. And then that night I went home and I was so embarrassed and I was so bummed and I couldn't sleep. And I woke up at 3 a.m. and I went onto the couch and I was just thinking about that meeting and how shitty of a job I did. And I just started crying. And I was on the couch at 3 a.m. crying. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I just felt so alone and sad. And that was like just a dark, horrible moment, embarrassing. But you know, that like building a company is full of those moments just over and over, at least for me. Maybe there's some people who just smooth sail the whole way, but not me.
I think it's, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's actually good for people to hear that the CEO of a company that's raised 240 million or plus or minus has had those 3 a.m. crying on the couch moments, right? Because I think makes it more real, right, for any entrepreneurs who are struggling, especially in this crazy time we're in. Listen, let's end on a happy note. That's a pretty exciting story. Anything you want to promote or plug or share? People want to learn more, of course, it's just patreon.com. But anything you want to kind of call people's attention to?
I think that this emerging group of creative people is already a massive market. I think Patreon is kind of proof of that. But I think it's going to grow at rates that people don't even understand yet. Not Patreon. I mean, I think Patreon will too, but I'm saying the market is going to grow. I would just encourage people to, like, entrepreneurs and people who love creators and are passionate about, you know, helping creative people build their dreams. Take this seriously. Like, look at creators, figure out what problems they have. Like, in a decade or two, the world is going to be full of professional artists who have small businesses running their art companies. And they're going to be making videos and music and podcasts, and the world is going to be full of them. And they're going to have so many problems that entrepreneurs can solve. Everything from healthcare to insurance to access to capital to all this stuff. And I just encourage, I think it's going to be great for businesses to be supporting those creative people. And so, a call to arms, I suppose, for founders and CEOs and entrepreneurs listening to this, to think about how you can help creators be successful. Serve the creator.
Well, of course, Patreon needs to start its venture arm so you can start to seed fund some of those, ancillary or tangential businesses, right? So anyway, awesome. Jack, thank you so much. This is super, super fun. Lots of good stuff here. My daughter wants to be a creator. She's 9 and she's just constantly making mostly stupid little videos, but like, she's going to be a customer of yours, I'm sure, in the next couple years. So is there an age restriction?
I mean, just the usual ones, but the thing is, she can do it now. Like she's I hope when I told my parents that I was going to be a creator, it was a long, hard conversation. And
right.
The truth is, that conversation doesn't have to be hard anymore. Like it's an option.
Right. Interesting. Cool. All right, Jack, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Good luck on everything. And this has been awesome. So thank you, sir.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.